Alexandra Pierce was a name that echoed in every corner of the business world. At just 38, she had built a legacy that most people could only dream of. From a modest family-owned transport company, she had forged an empire that stretched across nations, employing thousands and commanding boardrooms where billionaires took notice of her sharp mind and uncompromising will. Her life seemed flawless on the surface: glamorous magazine covers, charity galas, private jets, and a reputation as one of the most powerful female CEOs in America. But behind the polished smile and steely eyes, Alexandra was hiding a truth she could no longer control. For 2 years she had been silently battling a rare blood disorder, one that drained her strength little by little, no matter how hard she fought to mask it. Her board thought she was simply overworked, her employees whispered that she had become colder, more ruthless, and her competitors gleefully speculated when she would finally falter. None of them knew that her body was betraying her from within. One late evening, after another 14-hour day, she felt the familiar dizziness crash over her like a wave. She clutched her desk for balance, but her vision blurred, and within seconds she collapsed onto the marble floor of her corner office, the city lights glittering far below. When she awoke in the sterile glow of the hospital, the faces of specialists surrounded her bed. Their words were heavy, clinical, and devastating: "We've tried everything. Nothing is working. Time is slipping away." For the first time in her career, Alexandra Pierce felt powerless. She had built walls higher than any fortress, keeping her personal life empty so that nothing could distract her from her empire, yet now, at the brink of losing everything, including her life, she found herself alone. The fortune she had amassed, the power she wielded, the influence that once made her untouchable, it all meant nothing in the face of a disease that science could not yet cure. As the doctors left her room, their eyes lowered in resignation, Alexandra stared out of the window at the sprawling city she had conquered, a single thought pressing against her fading strength: what good is an empire, if the queen is dying? Miles Carter lived a life that stood in sharp contrast to the glittering world of Alexandra Pierce. At 39, he carried the quiet dignity of a man who had seen too much yet asked for little in return. Once a decorated combat medic in the military, he had served bravely through grueling deployments overseas, saving countless lives on battlefields where chaos ruled and hope was scarce. But when the uniform came off, Miles found himself fighting a different kind of battle, one against loneliness, poverty, and the constant weight of responsibility. His wife had passed away when their daughter Lily was barely a toddler, leaving him to raise her alone. Every day since, he worked tirelessly, juggling odd jobs. Mechanic by day, night security guard by evening, while still finding time to braid Lily's hair before school, pack her lunches, and read her bedtime stories with a tired but genuine smile. His neighbors admired his resilience, but no one knew that Miles often skipped meals to ensure Lily never went without. Unknown to him, the experimental medical treatment he had received during his military service, part of a classified trial meant to protect soldiers from blood-borne diseases, had left a unique marker in his blood, making it unlike anyone else's. It was this very marker that would soon become the difference between life and death for a woman he had never met. When the local hospital issued an urgent appeal for rare blood donors, Miles didn't hesitate. He had always believed that service didn't end when the uniform came off. If he could help save someone, he would. Filling out the forms, he barely paid attention to the details, his only thought being, if this helps someone's family keep their loved one, it's worth it. He never imagined that the patient in desperate need wasn't just any person, but the most powerful woman in the city, a woman whose face he had only seen on television, in headlines, and on giant billboards towering above streets he could barely afford to drive down. For Miles, it was just another act of service. For Alexandra, it would be the lifeline that no amount of money, power, or medical expertise had been able to provide. When the doctors told Alexandra that a compatible donor had been found, she barely lifted her eyes from the hospital bed. Weeks of failed treatments had hardened her to disappointment. But when Miles Carter entered the room, a quiet man in worn jeans holding the small hand of his daughter Lily, something about the simplicity of their presence caught her off guard. He was no high-profile philanthropist, no influential ally trying to win favor, just a man with steady eyes and a calmness that felt strangely grounding amid her spiraling world. The doctors explained that his blood carried a rare marker unseen in anyone else they had tested, and it could stabilize her collapsing system. For Alexandra, whose entire life had been about control, surrendering to the idea that her survival depended on a stranger was agonizing. Yet as she looked at Miles, who didn't flinch or ask questions about who she was, but simply nodded and rolled up his sleeve, she felt a strange warmth that wasn't medical at all, it was human. The transfusion began, and within hours, her color returned, her pulse steadied, and for the first time in months, she felt life coursing back into her body. Her staff and doctors marveled, whispering that it was a miracle, but Alexandra's gaze kept returning to the man who had given without expecting anything. When she tried to thank him, Miles simply shrugged, saying, anyone would have done it. But Alexandra knew that wasn't true. She had seen the way people valued her power, her wealth, her influence. Miles, however, looked at her as though she were just another person in need. That night, Alexandra couldn't sleep. For years she had built walls so high that no one dared approach her heart, and yet this man, with nothing but his quiet strength and the innocence of his daughter by his side, had broken through effortlessly. As she lay awake, feeling stronger than she had in months, one thought repeated in her mind: her survival was no longer the work of money or medicine, it was because of the blood of a single dad veteran who had nothing to gain and everything to give. As the weeks turned into months, Alexandra's health continued to stabilize with regular transfusions from Miles, but what surprised her more than her recovery was how naturally the quiet veteran and his daughter became a part of her life. At first, their meetings were formal, her insisting on compensating him generously, and him politely refusing with the same calm dignity that baffled her board of directors. But soon, the encounters stretched beyond the hospital walls. She invited Lily to her mansion one evening, thinking the child might enjoy the gardens, and ended up laughing on the grass as Lily braided her hair with wildflowers. Miles stood a few steps away, watching with a look that mixed gratitude and hesitation, as though he couldn't quite believe the most powerful woman in the city was kneeling in the dirt, giggling with his daughter. Slowly, Alexandra began to see the hollowness of the empire she had once clung to so fiercely. For years she had thought success meant solitude, but here was a man who had nothing yet offered her everything she had unknowingly craved: genuine care, stability, and the kind of love that wasn't bought or bargained. When her board pressured her to consider an arranged marriage with a wealthy investor to secure the company's future, Alexandra stunned them by standing up in the meeting, her voice firm but her heart calm, and declaring she already had all the future she needed. Days later, she met Miles at the small diner near his apartment, the kind of place she had never set foot in before, and confessed that his blood hadn't just saved her body, it had awakened her soul. Miles, who had sworn never to love again after losing so much, looked at her with a vulnerability he hadn't allowed anyone to see for years, and when he finally whispered, "Then maybe we saved each other," Alexandra knew she had found something worth more than her empire. That night, as Lily slipped her small hand into hers, Alexandra realized she wasn't just alive, she was finally living. The dying CEO had found her cure, not in medicine alone, but in the heart of a single dad who had given her more than blood, he had given her a family.